TikTok algorithm was superior. It was better than, Zuckerberg. He was shaken up, right? That there hasn't been an Indian business model, technology that's made an impact anywhere in the world.
Story about how Mark Zuckerberg stood up on the tables inside the Facebook office and said, this is existential. We're going to die if Google Plus is even half as good as they claim it is, and I have to stop them.
Yeah, Masa had this notion of a time machine strategy, which is basically looking at technology business models that have worked in the Western world and unleashing them in a market like India.
Talk a little bit about how you see these CEOs operate through different stages of their career and the organizations they lead as well. So what is your view on India? And
you should get everything, BTS together.
Love those little videos you sent me.
Are we rolling?
We started a podcast which celebrated entrepreneurship because we are an entrepreneurial challenger brand taking on Gillette and Philips.
Right.
We will celebrate entrepreneurship. We'll call it the Barbershop. There is some linkage, and we bring amazing people like you on who have experiences in entrepreneurship, leadership, business. And our audience group is 18 to 30-year-old, 18 to 25-year-old people from India who are hungry for inspiration.
I love it.
And wanting to build something. So that's the Barbershop. And
my favorite people to talk to in India, actually.
So, Alok, I actually wanted to,
Well, thank you for inviting me, by the way. I love it. Thank you for reaching out.
I'm so happy you're here.
I just love this type of engagement. Thank you.
Do you do a lot more of it after the book?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, Ankur's a great example. I mean, it is, I did a podcast with Mukesh Bansal a couple of weeks ago, which is going to drop this weekend. Very good. I reviewed it. I've done a few, and literally for the first time I watched myself and I wasn't bored. So it must be good. That's a pretty high bar.
Yes, he's been on this one.
Is he?
Yeah,
he's very good. He's very good. I mean, it's just thoughtful, intelligent. It was good. I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Amazing.
Covered a lot of ground. It was very good.
Yeah. No, I wanted actually, you have 30 years plus of, M&A, deal making, iBanking experience globally, and then of course your work as an investor. But I actually wanted to get into your thoughts on India, entrepreneurship, building large enterprises, and then of course people. So not in any order, but the other three things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
I want to actually kind of enter into the world of a CEO through you, right? Because I know you've probably met them in the hundreds, either doing deals for them or investing in them. But tell me what have you observed about the best CEOs in the world, in how they operate, how they think, how they visualize opportunity?
Oh boy, I mean, I think it's really, really tough to generalize because there is a lot of variation in the world of from the world of technology, where I spent a lot of my time, and the world of finance, for example, at Morgan Stanley. And I'll give you examples. Both people I admire tremendously. When I joined Morgan Stanley, the CEO was Richard Fisher, and he was a remarkable man who inspired trust and loyalty. And his standout quality whenever you interacted with him was humility. I mean, even if he called up the junior-most person, he would, it wouldn't be a secretary calling, Mr. Fisher calling for you. It would be like, hey, Alok, it's Dick. I mean, it is just a lot of humility and a feeling that I'm here for you, I'm working for the shareholders. It was a real standout quality.
Was it different compared to other people in his position, like other CEOs of banks?
I think good CEOs have that same quality, which is being humble, being accessible. I just think that is so crucial in terms of building loyalty and connectivity. Once you lose touch with your employees, you've kind of lost it. You're really not a leader. So the ability to connect with employees, to connect with people, as human beings, and it gets more and more challenging as an organization scales.
Yeah.
And that's where sitting down with people, it's a little bit easier these days electronically. But that to me is a real standout quality. Now keep in mind that I'm operating, or I was operating, in what was essentially a people's business. You know, you work for McKinsey, so you'll know exactly what I mean, right? So you cannot treat a McKinsey consultant the same way you might, you don't have the luxury of reaching out or connecting the same way if you're a General Motors kind of CEO and you've got workers out in, labor out in a factory worker in Mexico. So it's a little bit different, but to me, I really value that. There are other CEOs, Sonsan's a great example, who can be inspirational in a completely different way.
You talk about him a lot.
I do because he's just such an interesting character to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Now, with him, it's a case of, and this is frequently the case with the world of technology, that the ideas and his thought process is so inspirational that you feel like, okay, I want to follow this guy. That's a different way of connecting, which is with Masa, it was, he has this corporate slogan, happiness for everyone. And what does that mean? I mean, it's like, as I say in the book, like, it's something that could be on a Disneyland, Disney World advertisement or a billboard or whatever. But he's talking about using technology to change the world. So there's an idealism there, which is sort of inspirational. And you say, okay, this guy's cool. I mean, I really, really like what he's doing, changing the world. I want to latch on to that. A lot of people loved working for Google. It was, they pay well, and it's a cool, but they latched on to the vision. Don't be evil. We're changing the world, and that happens a lot in the world of technology. You sign on to a vision that you find inspiring,
and you think the CEO lives through that. Amazing. Do you think humility is a privilege? You get to choose to be humble because you're in a position that allows you to do that. Otherwise,
I think in the world of technology in particular, it's not just a way of connecting with people. It is absolutely essential that you be not just humble, but even paranoid. There's that old Andy Grove line of only the paranoid survive.
Yeah.
In the world of technology, that's really crucially important. You get complacent, you get cocky, you're like, you're like dead, basically. Right? Because there's always someone. If you Google, there's perplexity coming after you, right? I mean, I barely use Google anymore. Great company, but I barely use Google anymore.
Yeah.
That's all we have to evolve, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be paranoid because there's always something coming at you in the world of technology that's going to attack your business model, particularly when you're making lots of money.
Yeah, because that's value people
Become
are
a target. Become a target.
And how do you see them operate on a day-to-day basis? Like whether it's Derek Fisher or Masa Son or any of the CEOs who you've worked with, and maybe you could pick up examples of people who you've seen at different stages of maybe their career, where they were maybe slightly lower down and kind of grew up to be CEOs, or people at different stages of the organization they ran. So like founders who were in the 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and then you kind of saw them scale. I know that, for example, you spoke about Vijay in the book, Vijay Shekhar Sharma, where he must have come to SoftBank to pitch maybe a lot earlier, and then Paytm scaled a lot more later on, and now he's a public markets company, and of course his own style has kind of molded a lot more. But talk a little bit about how you see these CEOs operate through different stages of their career and the organizations they lead as well.
I think typically when you're really young, you tend to be a little bit cocky, a little bit arrogant, and that's not a bad thing because you really have to be, as a 20-something, to feel that you can go out and change the world. They're not all like that, by the way. I mean, I remember meeting Ritesh Agarwal. He was 19, 20 when he first invested. And the number one quality that jumped out to me is I was expecting to see someone sort of cocky, to use my own word, a little bit arrogant. Not at all. I mean, the guy was so mature.
Yeah.
I mean, so humble. It was just a pleasure to see. But having said that, that is not uncommon. At one extreme you had Travis Kalanick. Kind of the whole ethos. Zuckerberg was like that. The whole ethos of move fast and break things. Right? There has to be an element of that craziness, of that self-belief that I want to break things, I want to destroy. But you have to evolve. Now, if you don't evolve, you can always do what a lot of other founders do, which is, okay, I'll bring in a kind of an elder or a professional manager, the way Larry and Sergey did with Eric Schmidt, and So frequently you can do that, but if you want to develop as a manager, then you have to develop a bit of a different skill set, which is, okay, I need to engage more with people. I need to engage with the external constituencies. There's a certain way of dealing with research analysts, and you become big enough, then you're dealing with politicians, and you're becoming a public figure, and you have to evolve. You have to grow. It's not easy to do, but you have to grow.
Yeah.
And I suspect I haven't followed Vijay, but I suspect he's had to go through that journey, because some of his, kind of public appearances, there's this YouTube video I remember very vividly was leaked with some, kind of choice Hindi words, etc. I mean, you got to lose some of that and realize that, okay, I'm in a position of responsibility.
Yeah.
Now, there are guys, people, Elon Musk is a great example, who has never really abandoned that, but I think that's not a good role model, because I think that's to Elon's detriment. I think some of the things he says, some of the things he tweets are just so outrageously irresponsible that you say, come on, man. I mean, like, richest man in the world, you're sitting outside, next to the president of the United States. I mean, you're not in the entertainment business.
But he's insanely self-secure about it, right? So there are people who say that this comes from insecurity. I always wonder, like, if you're worth $400-500 billion, what insecurity?
I don't think it's insecurity, and I think it might be a warped definition of what he thinks is funny or what he thinks is cool. And he describes himself as being on the spectrum, so one shouldn't be too judgmental.
Yeah.
But kind of some people are just wired differently, and he thinks it's funny to tweet and challenge Mark Zuckerberg to a dick measuring contest. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like just think of. I mean, this is like, at that point, you're the richest guy in the world, right? The responsibility, the position you're in.
Yeah, you're in the presidency.
And you're like, I mean, this is like juvenile, like 16-year-old behavior.
And I think a lot of people take the inspiration from absolute individual tweets or positions of this nature without the context of the entire person.
Yeah.
That there's also a person who's changing the world and who's kind of has very deep thoughts on technology or on humanity. So this is just like a small, side distraction in what is actually a very deep.
But sometimes it is. I'll give you another example. Dogecoin.
Yeah.
What is it? The guys who invented it as a joke, because they thought crypto was a joke, right? So they wanted to. It was their way of being ironic and poking fun at crypto.
Correct.
So they came up with Dogecoin. Kya hai Dogecoin? I mean, it's like, just stamp it like a dog and you print it. There's not even unlike Bitcoin, there's no scarcity, right?
Yeah.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
And Elon latches onto it. People start buying it. It's worth, like, when I last looked, it was $30 billion.
It's crazy.
People speculated in it. Now, this is madness. You're promoting that. It's completely worthless.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even satisfy the most basic tenet of value, which is scarcity.
Correct.
At least with Bitcoin, there's like people who believe, people who don't believe. But at least with Bitcoin, it's a finite number.
Correct.
Right? So there is security, etc. There is at least intelligent design.
Correct.
With Dogecoin, it's just a joke.
But there's a lot of that stuff that happened in the US. Do you remember the Hawk Tour meme?
There
she
is,
created her own
there
coin.
Is, but the problem is, yes, and there's a lot that goes on in the world. But I'm getting at the idea of someone like an Elon Musk promoting that type of behavior. That's irresponsible. Yeah.
I completely agree. I completely agree. I think a lot of founders, and I see this in more social setups in India, it's a small circle of people, like probably 1,000 founders who kind of represent maybe the top 90% of venture value that has been created in the country. A lot of them will take inspiration from this and kind of a more strong man kind of approach to business building, which frankly may or may not be the right.
Strong man, strong woman is fine. You need strength, but it's much more your public persona and what you say and do in public, your actions, your speech, how you conduct yourself. I mean, the conversation started with people evolving, and that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, you have to behave with a certain, well, it just sounds ridiculous to even say this, but you have to behave with a certain degree of maturity.
Yeah. Who are the people you have seen who have been amazing? Like, I think Mark Zuckerberg, for me, is an example of a person who was incredible at product opportunity out of his Harvard dorm room.
Yeah.
kind of when the company was scaling the way it did in the early 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, was able to really like, whether he got Sean Parker or that team together.
Yeah.
And then 11, 12, 13, when they started monetizing it, then became an ad company, public. And today also, I think, it's $1 trillion plus.
Yeah.
And, he's, the fact that, and he's only 37 or he's a fairly young guy.
Yeah.
It's insane that, I read emails that he writes about. I don't know whether you've read the one about whether he's evaluating buying Instagram, Foursquare or Pinterest. And he kind of writes to a few senior folks about how he's thinking about it and how it's going to be. I think there's a similar email about acquiring WhatsApp. And the guy was always thinking like 4 steps ahead, despite being very young. How do you see that evolution happen? What do CEOs and founders do, in your view, or anyone in kind of who has a large canvas of operation? How do they kind of stay ahead of the curve and see opportunity and not double guess themselves when clearly they're kind of going against what might be popular notion?
Yeah, well, Zuckerberg's a really interesting example because he is, people have made fun of him. That movie, Social Network, which we've all seen, was, I thought, unfair. The caricature, which are completely different from the individual I met with. And by the way, the individual I see now, in public, what he says is completely different from the individual I met with 10 years ago. So his evolution actually has been quite remarkable. I mean, I think unlike, say, a Masayoshi Son or even an Elon Musk, he wasn't someone who set out to solve this huge, intractable technology problem. He wasn't a technologist in the strictest sense.
Correct.
He was if you believe the caricature, and I think this bit of it, as far as I know, is true, he was just playing around with something that allowed guys to meet with women, which is not quite the same as, I'm going to come up with protein folding, the way Demis Hassabis did at Google, won the Nobel Prize for chemistry, or even, what they did with DeepMind. And, these are really, really complicated problems to solve. And he's kind of stumbled on it. It became big, but every strategic move he's made is absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Right? And it's WhatsApp, it's Instagram, it's the change to mobility. He saw the threat from TikTok, right? But was, again, very quick to jump on the AI bandwagon, and he's done that remarkably. Yeah. So full credit to him in terms of evolving. And so you have to do that. And I think it is, to me, one of the key things I look for and I admire in recruiting and otherwise is intellectual curiosity, right? People who are always, whatever you're doing, whatever you're reading, and I think reading is important, just observing, and it's even more important in the age of AI, right? Because you have to think out of the box, you have to think a little bit differently, and constantly observing, trying to understand what's going on, how is this working, how is this not working. That's just a crucial quality.
Yeah. With Zuckerberg especially, like I think people I remember when Google, I don't know whether you remember this, do you remember Google launching its own social network called Google Plus?
Yeah.
There's a whole story about how Mark Zuckerberg stood up on the tables inside the Facebook office and said, this is existential. We're going to die if Google Plus is even half as good as they claim it is.
Yeah.
And we'll cease to exist in 1 year. We have to stop them. Yeah. And he just rallied his forces to kind of make sure that Google Plus, and the product was shit, but he was ahead of the curve. I think even with, I think Instagram, when people say Instagram, they think about what Instagram is today. But it was a totally different product in 2012.
It's evolved, yeah.
It was a very, very basic product. Even like Snapchat, the whole ability of getting into stories was a Snapchat innovation.
Yes, it was.
So Zuckerberg did not innovate it.
You're right. Yeah.
And then he quickly put it into
But this
Instagram.
is my point. I mean, the execution and the strategic decisions, to mobility, towards AI, integrating AI, it's very, very cool. But that gets into the point I made earlier about being paranoid. I mean, if I'm in Google's shoes right now, I'm telling you, I'm a case in point. Right? I don't, by the way, own shares in Perplexity, and have no relationship or no bias towards Arvind Srinivasan rather. But I use Perplexity.
Yeah.
I've stopped using Google.
Yeah.
Because there's just no comparison. Now, Google, is talking about integrating AI into its search, but it's just not the same.
Yeah. No, I've started, like, we had a ChatGPT primer in our office a few days back.
Yeah.
And I think people just think of AI as like this, at least at an interface level, they think of AI as an advanced Google, which is able to synthesize a Google search into decent information. But the more I'm starting to train the ChatGPT models in my phone, it's becoming very clear. Two things are becoming clear to me. One is that my productivity. So I'll give you an example. Okay, I don't know how much you use Perplexity, because I like Perplexity, but for some things, for example, O3 and O4, O3 Mini and O4, for example, I have a bunch of information that reaches me and maybe a few of the senior folks in the company every week. It's a combination of supply dashboards, fill rates, sales, MISs, some written commentary by some of our management folks, etc. It all comes together in like a primer, I've learned how to upload it. My first upload was maybe three and a half months back, before maybe December. And I said, tell me the 10 most, if you put on the hat of a great CEO, and tell me the 10 most important questions you would ask if this was the information given to you. And I got complete rubbish back. And then I started saying, no, this is not right. Here are the 10 questions I think I'm going to ask in this review, or here are the emails I'm going to send out. I started coaching. So I started I started putting all my responses back into the chat.
And it learned.
And then by week 5, week 6, it realized, okay, he likes these metrics. He likes asking this person this. He wants to know more about this. This seems to be more important. And he was it was there in a few meetings. And by the 10th or 11th week, this took 3 months. Had I taken his first output out, I'd be like, this is useless. But the ability to coach it and then send back feedback saying, hey, the review got done. Thanks for these 3 questions. It was great. But today, and so now I'm using it for everything, man.
I tell you what I really enjoy about ChatGPT in particular is the voice interactivity. And you can really have some fun with it, right? I mean, it is unbelievably good. So my son-in-law is Russian origin, but was educated in France, so he's fluent in Russian and in French. And he made a query, and he rapidly, in one sentence, went back and forth between Russian, French, and English, and asked for a response in English. And it responded seamlessly, right? Amazing. Then I asked, same question. I asked for a response I want you to respond in English, but with an Indian accent. Right? So I responded with an Indian accent, but it was a very Peter Sellers stiff kind of accent. Funny, but very, kind of a caricature, right? I said, no, I want you to give me an answer in in English, right? The way people speak in Bollywood. It just did it brilliantly.
And it's amazing. And it's not gibberish anymore.
It's not. It's great.
And it gets better.
It's really sophisticated.
So I got my parents on ChatGPT, by the way, recently. My mom's a singer. And she's like, no. I said, tell me the 5 things on your mind right now about music. She's like, I'm trying to write a bandish and rag gauti. Like, great. Put down, I want to write a bandish and rag gauti. Let's start open-ended. She put it down. She made a project called Bandish, put it down. And he's like, good. Can I ask you what themes you want to do it in? And she's like, this is ChatGPT. There's not any other GPT. It's on ChatGPT. She's like, I want to talk about devotion to Sri Krishna. Here are some words I like. I said, why don't you put in 3-4 bandishes you've written before? Just put the audio notes in and give it a flavor about you. She put it in. And then she's like, okay, now can you write a bandish? So he wrote a bandish. He wrote a full bandish and rag gauti. She's like, okay, now that's good. Can you tell me the Swaralipi for this? What are the notes at how do I sing this? And he gave it back. And she's like, no, this is too basic. If I sing it like this, it's good. You tell me how the transition between the swaras are. And then he gave something more complex. And then she's like, can you sing it for me? Like, no, I can't sing it for you. But there are other people who can. And maybe why don't you sing it? And I can tell you whether it's right or wrong.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And
that's amazing interaction.
It was insane. And I think the more she interacts with ChatGPT, the better the outputs are going to be.
The voice interaction makes it easier. by the way.
It
it's
blows
great.
my
Yeah,
mind.
Yeah.
It
yeah.
absolutely. But coming back to CEOs,
Yeah.
and tell me a little bit about the ones who you have seen more closely, maybe San or Nikesh or folks at Morgan Stanley, or who's the best CEO you've seen running a meeting, for example. I'm very curious about this stuff. Like, this is stuff that like really.
I mean, I'm a big fan of people who try and build consensus. In fact, it's actually funny you ask that. I am so I'm writing a book now, and it is fiction,
Okay.
and I think in the first chapter there is obviously hypothetical. It's fiction, a meeting where a CEO is. And this must be my vision of how a meeting should be run. That's why I wrote it this way, subconsciously, right? Is a CEO is sitting there and he's doing his executive committee meeting, and they're talking about something that is debatable, a strategic decision, kind of a big investment decision, which one of the people reporting into him has proposed, and he does not voice an opinion. He gets everyone to weigh in, and he has a clear view of his own, but listens to everyone, and then and doesn't bias the decision in any way. Just like encourages people to speak up, and then summarizes all of that and says, "Okay, I get what you said. I get what you said, but here's my issue with this. Here's my issue with that, and here's what I think." But does it in a way that makes everyone feel that they got a fair hearing, and that they've had some input into that decision. To me, that's a wonderful, wonderful quality, right? Something I admire. Now, coming back to your decision about CEO behavior, it's one very interesting distinction to talk about. This became very topical in the Valley, and I think it's interesting for all your listeners. I think Brian Chesky started that. Brian Chesky being the founder of Airbnb, and Brian made the comment, and it kind of went viral, that every time he's deviated from founder mode into manager mode, it's cost him, right? And that was controversial because the Valley has great founders. And there are a lot of people who believe that either founders transition to manager mode or they bring in managers. And here's Brian, who's been a very successful CEO, not just a founder, who's telling you every time he's drifted away from being a founder, it's cost him because he just doesn't think things get done the same way. Now, what does that mean? So I'll give you an example. My boss, Son, who I still admire, look up to, he was always and probably always will be in founder mode. Like, what does that mean? He owns, now, SoftBank is an investment conglomerate, right? It owns businesses, has investments all over the world. One of the companies that we owned 85% of, I think it was 83% actually, was Sprint. It's a carrier, mobile phone company in the US. Struggling. But San, I get on a call with him. He'd invited me to join the regular calls with Sprint's network team. I remember one call vividly where he tells them, "You've got a blind spot in your network in downtown Houston, right? And you need to fix that, and here's how I think you can fix that." That's founder mode, right? This is like not even, it is a core business, and he's focused on the business. It's a big investment. But this is like one of many businesses that SoftBank controls. And that degree of focus when we're doing the ARM acquisition, for example, it's a $32 billion acquisition we made. He wants to know not just what we paid bankers, which is very big numbers, like 20 million plus, but he wants to know how much fees we're paying the lawyers and the PR agents, right? The PR firm that was working for us.
Really?
So, you're talking about maybe that's too much, but that's what I mean by founder mode. Which is with everything, it's my company, right? It's like I care about everything. There is no detail that is too small for me to not care about.
But do you think I always wonder this, because I cannot be that detail-oriented exhaustively. But I know founders, or I've seen CEOs, especially as a consultant, when the operation was huge, let's say running a couple of $1 billion of cement in the country. I would see CEOs in a review go in extreme detail on one particular thing with, let's say a clinker production or this particular machine in this factory, just to give a sense to everyone that details are not lost. Because otherwise they cannot do that at all. But everyone then walks out of the room thinking, this guy notices
No, but that
everything.
sounds like a CEO who's doing it for effect. If you're genuinely in founder mode, you care about everything.
Okay.
Now there is a real issue of it's someone like Masa son. His consciousness is not there's a limit to scalability.
Correct.
You can't follow everything everywhere, but it encourages that same behavior all the way across. That look, this is how we need to conduct ourselves. Look, my good friend you mentioned, Nikesh, he's a great example of a guy who is just a brilliant exposition of the manager mode. Now with Nikesh, it is a very, I won't say rigid, because he's flexible, he's accessible, can be quite intimidating because the guy's really smart, but kind of a real belief that there's reporting lines that he's delegated. But with Masa, he will reach out to, if the answer lies with like the junior most analyst, sitting out, I don't know, whatever, he will reach out. He will reach out to the person, the individual, no matter how junior, and figure out like, okay, I want to talk to that person. Whereas managers tend to be more aware of, okay, I've got a chain of command that I need to work through, and that type of formality has its place. But I have to say, in terms of if I had to favor one approach or the other, which I found what I related to and found more engaging was being in founder mode.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. And that brings me to my question on Indian founders. I know you've, through SoftBank, you've had some exposure to them in possibly meetings, pitches, running companies with them. What do you think about the suite of founders that Masa kind of selected, and kind of Ritesh, for example, was almost, and you talk about that in the book as well, was just someone who he almost doted on as an investor and trusted fully.
No, I think his exact words, which I talk about in the book, was he's the one person who reminds me of me when I was his age, which is quite a compliment.
So I think there's Bhavesh, Albinder, there's Ashish at Off Business, there's Vijay, Ritesh, and I think
Kunal and Rohit.
Kunal and Rohit, the Snapdeal.
Yeah.
What was common about them? Which of them did you see evolve in different ways?
Now, look, I haven't dealt with. I don't want to overstate the extent to which I was involved with the entrepreneurs. I was involved in doing deals, certainly with with Bhavesh, Ola, Snapdeal, a little bit with Ritesh, and that was the extent of my engagement. So I have to say my engagement was limited very much to actually doing the deals.
Yeah.
My focus was very much global. So there are probably people much more qualified than I to comment on what some of these entrepreneurs will like to work with on a regular basis.
Think about what they've built, and this is like over the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people say that India is maybe an over, like Sajid, we spoke to Sajid the other day on the Bloomberg, on the Indus Valley report at Bloom Ventures.
Yeah.
And he says that, India is a over-ventured country, but we have no choice. We have to be that way for some time because we are seeing really good outcomes happen 10, 12 years into it happening. And we just need a lot more of it for the next 10, 12 years for this to really, really kind of take effect. But what is your view on India and being an entrepreneur, new age? We are seeing industries like consumer brands, like we are in the consumer brand space. You're of course seeing quick commerce. Everyone talks about quick commerce. Have you ever tried? Like, are you a Blinkit or a Zepto?
I haven't tried it, but I've heard people rave about it, and I've had someone do a little demo, like a little ice cream delivery. It's very impressive.
Oh, it is crazy.
Yeah.
It is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So you should, when you're in India, especially if you're in Delhi, you will not believe the extent to which that industry has kind of evolved.
I know. It is
like
quite
a
amazing.
2-year period,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So whether it's quick commerce, whether it is fintech, now you're seeing whether it's lending or the ability to now just get so many people in the formal financial ecosystem. Every industry is now seeing founders come in, get access to capital, and build out what they think is going to be a disproportionately outsized company at some point in time. And it is something amazing for us to watch, and I've been a part of the ecosystem for a while. But you kind of come in and go. You do. I don't know how much of your time now you spend in India versus before. But how do you see India as an investor, as someone who calls it home? and of course has worked with entrepreneurs for so many years.
So I will give you, let me start by talking a little bit about how Masa-san viewed India. And because I still think that is a good lens through which an investor should look at India. Masa had this notion of a time machine strategy, which is basically looking at technology business models that have worked in the Western world and unleashing them in a market like India, and took the view that those disruptive technologies, and at one point you could have called ride-sharing disruptive. At one point it was novel, right? Unleashed them in India. E-commerce, at one point it was novel, right? Unleashed those in India because you have, there's nothing really to disrupt, right? I mean, fintech, for example, right? I mean, you have credit card penetration that's non-existent. You never really had a mall culture in India.
Yeah.
You have a few in India left now, and but it never really took off. Organized retail in India never really took off.
Yeah.
So when you don't have anything to disrupt, it becomes even easier, right? Because there's no, in the U.S., for example, the kind of this deep-seated people hanging out at malls, or your weekend outing to a shopping mall becomes like that's an excursion.
Yeah.
It'd be a family outing, right? And people still do. Dubai people do that. It's all shopping malls. But it's an interesting way to think about the proposition. It's very simple. It's not rocket science. And I think if that's all you did in the context of an economy that is going to grow at 5%, and you've got the demographics and consumption trends in your favor, it's an easy place to invest, and it's an easy place to make money. It is at some level disappointing that you don't see any, and I don't mean this to be pejorative, but it is what it is. You just have to recognize it, that there hasn't been an Indian business model, technology made in India, that's made an impact anywhere in the world, right? I mean, China, TikTok, for example, right? I mean, the TikTok algorithm was superior. It was better than, Zuckerberg. I mean, he was shaken up, right? I mean, because he saw TikTok and said, geez, these guys are killing me in terms of engagement, user engagement. Right?
Still are.
Still are. So, now they've got issues, right? I mean, you get banned in India, and, like in the US, am I going to be around? How do you attract people? It becomes tough, right? So it's tough for them. And Instagram is obviously caught up. So it is DeepSeek, another recent example. You've had that in China. I can't think of a single innovation like that's got the world's attention coming out of India. And that's a little bit disappointing.
And do you think that's going to change?
You mentioned Bloom Ventures, and I met with Karthik yesterday. And I don't think he'll mind me sharing this. And I'll give him full credit for an insight, because I'd never thought of it that way. And I think it's a very important insight. The point he made to me is his investors, and I won't name names, but includes U.S. asset allocators, endowments, etc. Their view is, now think about what that does to an ecosystem. Their view is that, look, if I want to invest in disruptive technologies, early stage technology businesses, I've got that covered. Right? Because I'm investing, I've got access to Sequoia, Benchmark, etc. Right? So I've got that piece, that upside in my portfolio covered. That's not the reason I'm investing in you.
Yeah.
And if that's the message he gives to a Bloom and to other Indian VCs, then that impacts their mindset in terms of the types of businesses they want to back, right? And that kind of becomes I won't call it a vicious circle, because that's misleading, but that's not exactly encouraging the development of an ecosystem that promotes moonshots.
Yeah, because incentives are then are directionally elsewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
I completely agree with you, actually. I completely agree with you. I think if you were to look at last 10 years, the most innovative technology that's come out of India, in my view, and I would mean this outside of ISRO and DRDO. So I think Chandrayaan and that whole space exploration and space tech at that cost was, I think, is out of this world. And I don't understand it too much, but I think the numbers are brilliant.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think UPI, which is the India payment stack, and ONDC.
UPI is fantastic, but that's execution. It's not technology. To be able to do that on a scale is fantastic.
at that cost?
Yeah.
But make a distinction between
one
execution.
thing Indians are able to do, Indian businessmen are remarkably good at doing, is great example is communication. Because you're always dealing with the most cost sensitive consumer in the world.
Always.
Telecom's a great example because you look at ARPUs in India. What is it? It's like $2 or $3. Like that's highest end, right?
Yeah.
For Airtel, etc. Right? Whereas in the US, it's like $70.
Yeah.
It's like night and day, right?
Yeah.
Even China is like $15.
Yeah.
Right? Africa is more than India, right?
Yeah.
So you're dealing with the most price-sensitive consumer in the world. So whatever you do, you have to do it at absolute low cost.
Did you see the Jio Starlink announcement?
And Airtel, Starlink.
What is happening with Airtel Starlink?
Same thing. It was in the papers today. I think Airtel. I haven't read it, but I saw the headlines.
Really?
Yeah. It's not
because
an
Reliance
exclusive.
and Starlink just announced today.
Well, I look at today's Economic Times. I mean, I just saw the headline, so it's not an exclusive deal.
Wow. I thought
I
this
could
is,
be wrong, but this is today's news. So yeah, please.
and Tesla's coming in as well. Tesla's
Yeah,
coming in
now
as well.
Tesla is like, it'll be interesting. I mean, Tesla is going through a really, really rough period.
Yeah.
Right? We've talked enough about Elon, but he is the way he's going about. His this is a different Doge we're talking about.
Yeah.
The government efficiency thing is it's pissed a lot of people off, and all the early buyers, the core buyers for Tesla Model S were kind of the liberal environmentalist, and they're all like, okay, I don't want to have anything to do with this guy. And it's coming back to hurt him.
You think that's
It's happening. Well, this is very real. People are boycotting. That's like, I'm giving up my Tesla. In fact, it's really comical. One another thing people are doing, someone posted this on X, ironically, a number of cars which are very obviously Teslas but are being rebranded. In other words, people have gone and put a Honda sticker on the back. I don't want to have anything to do with the Tesla brand.
At that
Otherwise,
scale,
they can't. They've invested too much in the car, and they probably like the car.
Yeah.
They don't want to get rid of it, but they don't want to be associated with the brand. So they've gone to someone and said, okay, take away that Tesla logo and slap a Honda logo or Toyota or whatever.
But do you think this is like a San Francisco, California situation, or it's a...
No. Look at Tesla. Look at the stock. It's plastered, right? I mean, it's down 50%. It's gone back to, it had a huge run up following the election victory, but now it's all the way back.
NASDAQ dropped 4 or 5% in one day.
Yeah, but Tesla's gone down one heck of a lot more than NASDAQ. Yeah. And by the way, that's probably overdone. I think Tesla is a phenomenal company. I'm a huge believer in autonomous cars, and their lead in self-driving is phenomenal. I think what Elon will do in robotics, what he's done with SpaceX is very, very cool. So it's much more than just a car company.
Yeah.
But the core business is suffering. Europe is the same thing, right? I mean, kind of the position he's taken with respect to German elections. I mean, nobody in Europe wants to buy Teslas. Nobody in the UK wants to buy Teslas. China, a little bit of the same thing. China's a big market for Tesla. Right?
Yeah. I think EV and China is an interesting love relationship.
Canadians, same thing. I mean, Canadians won't buy anything American now.
What do you think about this whole tariff thing, by the way? And I know it's a slight departure from our discussion, but
I don't even know what to think about it because it changes
every
within
week.
a day. It's with 40% tariffs, 50% tariff. Oh no, 1 month not. Or I mean, it's just you don't know what to make of it. Exclusion for auto, then we changed. I mean, it is insane what's going on. You can't keep track of it.
It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, it is. It's absurd.
Is it unprecedented? Has the world ever seen this before?
Completely unprecedented.
And it's all Trump initiated?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, it's fine. It's debatable whether tariffs make sense, and there's arguments for and against, and this is economics 101. I don't want to talk about that, but at least have consistency. You can't say tariffs 20%, oh, we've got a deal with Trudeau, so okay, no tariffs. And then you change your mind, and then you change your mind again. I mean, how do you, you can't make any sense of it.
Because I think diplomacy goes out the window when consistent positions are not held, right? Yeah. Now you don't know what you're negotiating over.
Yeah.
The rules of the game, suddenly you're playing chess and instead of 64 squares, there's 600. Now, how do you play the game?
Yeah.
You don't know how to play the game. The game is different.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with you. But coming back to India, I think, what do you think about... I agree with you that we have not... there are two things actually. One is, And we were just discussing this yesterday. We run a podcast called Asymmetric with two other founders, where we tried to break this down, and we said, look, India, building from India for the world has always been a pipe dream outside of IT, right? And even now, because of AI, there's significant vulnerability.
That's under threat. Yeah.
Significant, and it's very quick. It's not like a 5-year thing. We don't have time to kind of do it. And then we came up with like two reasons. One is, I think, our ability to get cultural nuance, legal, governmental compliance nuances world over is complicated. So the ability, even for like conglomerates like the Tata Group or Mahindras, to kind of go to North America, capture a huge market, get an American CEO, and treat him or her like a part of the Tata Group, despite being culturally completely different from the promoters, is not high. We don't do that as well as, let's say, some of the truly global companies in the world. And second to the question which you were saying, which is we don't have a me first attitude, and maybe it's because of incentives of capital, but our ability as capitalists, or at least in private enterprise, to really do disruptive work is limited. Our risk appetite is limited. Is it a stage of the country thing? Is it a...
No, it's not a stage of the country thing. I mean, you look at, I don't know what it is. I wish I had a great answer for you, and you probably know it better than I do. I thought what Karthik said was very interesting, and that may be I think a small piece of the puzzle. I don't think that's the whole answer. I heard someone else tells me, and I've had this discussion with a number of people to validate it, that Indian promoters or founders are too easily satisfied. You get to kind of a book value net worth of like, I don't know what the, 400, 500 crores, and you say, okay, enough. I made so much money. I don't need to do this anymore. That's not necessarily true of value founders.
Yeah.
There are a lot, guys who are really, really successful and like, okay, I want to make a dent in the universe, right? So maybe some of that is missing. That is not my opinion, by the way. That's not informed by my experience, but I've been told that is the case. So I'm just like, throwing that out for discussion purposes. Those are some of the things that have been kicked around, but there is no earthly reason why, a group of really smart computer scientists, AI engineers, shouldn't be doing what DeepSeek has managed to pull off. Now, maybe there's just a dearth of homegrown PhDs. Maybe they all migrate, which I think a lot of that still happens with IITs, right? But that's the piece that's missing.
When DeepSeek came out, that's what people are saying, that this is just the start.
Yeah.
Like what's going to happen in China over the next year and a half, the world is not ready for it.
Yeah.
And I think...
But the beauty of it is it's open source. You can copy it.
Yeah. How ironic,
Make
right?
it better. And
Can you imagine China is like...
It is truly, truly ironic. The idea that this is not like government funded, this is like entrepreneurs. I mean, it's cool. Coming out of a hedge fund. I mean, all the things you associated with America, right? Hedge fund, entrepreneurial, the youngsters coming up with being giant killers, like, coming up with something that gets, all of the United States, all the big boys to take notice. That's like really cool.
And open source.
Yeah, and open source, exactly.
For China to do something open source is insane.
Like basically saying, you know what, it's like almost a big fuck you. It's like you think we guys like plagiarize, we copy, come copy us.
Yeah, and it's really hard, by the way. I think that's the one thing that's really, it's shaken up Sam Altman and the entire tribe of Valley AI, even including Arvind, by the way. I think when he was doing a demo of DeepSeek, and he was truly impressed by it.
Well, but again, I don't think it's, I don't know, it's not like I talked to Arvind, but I got, because I'm a subscriber, I got an email, which went out presumably to all subscribers, that basically said, DeepSeek's great, and they've integrated DeepSeek, and it's like, it's so I when I do a lot of my queries, you see the whole, it's going to DeepSeek, and you see the whole reasoning process, and that's pretty cool. So they've incorporated it into their...
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Perplexity is a great product, by the way. It's a great product.
It is. By the way, Grok is really cool too.
I've not tried that.
Oh, it's really, really good. I tell you what Grok does really well. It's quick, and it's as good as any of the others. It is wonderfully integrated into the X app, which is very cool.
Correct.
Because if you're on X, then you're there and all you do is hit grok.
Yeah.
And if your question is related to something that you've read on X,
Yeah.
designed to encourage that, that's great. But what it also does really well is it gives you responses in a very conversational tone.
Really?
Yeah.
I've got it. I have not been. Are you on X?
I am on X, yeah.
I have not been as active on the X as I have
Yeah.
been on some of the other
Yeah.
social media platforms. I
Yeah.
think Barbershop, for example, is very YouTube and Instagram friendly.
Yeah.
But coming back to India, you think it's a good time? I struggle with this, by the way. I think at a demographic level, I struggle with, and I was talking to Ankur before this, that there is a middle India that is now, where unemployment is now becoming tricky,
Yeah.
where a lot of the jobs are under threat, especially in the white collar situations. A lot of our average screen time is now touching 8 hours.
Screen time.
Screen time.
Really?
Per day, yeah. We are
Wow.
ahead of most countries in the
That's
world.
a little
on screen.
scary, man.
It's very scary. So, and we have cheap data.
8
right?
hours.
8 hours a day. Tons of content. Too many people. Not enough liquidity in the market. Consumption is tricky. Last 6 to 9 months, I think we have seen unprecedented moving out of foreign money from India. We have a rupee that refuses to stop sliding, and we are now smelling a recessionary environment, which earlier, even though there would be global recessions, India would be
Recessionary environment, as in like not just slowing down a growth, but actual recession.
That's the word
Okay.
people are throwing around.
I know that, but that's a little scary.
Because you think about it, where has growth happened in India now? Like at a pure level, India has not seen growth outside of government spending. We haven't seen that for the last 4-5 years. Maybe travel and that industry after COVID.
Yeah.
But other than that, we have really not, right? And even the disruption we're seeing, like quick commerce and this and that, that's movement of spending from one place to the other.
Yeah.
That's not incremental in any way.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's one worldview.
Yeah.
That's a very pessimistic worldview. The other one is that we have never seen the kind of interest in entrepreneurship, access to capital, government.
Well, if you're talking about
lobbying behind.
employment, I mean, I think the AI, I met with an entrepreneur actually this morning before coming here, and he was very specific and granular about the number of jobs he's eliminated using AI in his business. And that's very real. And again, when you're operating in the most cost-sensitive, consumer in the world, pressure to cost, pressure to attack that, always there. You're going to integrate AI into your business. In his case, AI chatbots, customer acquisition, across the board, like absolutely across the board using AI only.
We have the same designers today that we did when the company was 1/20th the scale.
Yeah.
Same. We don't need more. So yes. So there is one worldview that's difficult. There's the other worldview that that we have never seen such entrepreneurial fervor in the country, and not only at 0 to 1 journeys, but also in large. For example, people are seeing paints as an opportunity. Suddenly, Mr. Birla and everyone's going after it. People are really premiumizing. Global brands are coming into India. You spoke about malls. Throughput per store for Cartier is now 8 times what it was 3 years back. So luxury is clearly finding its feet
Yeah, it
in
is.
India.
Now, a little bit of that is due to so much wealth being created in the stock market, right? I mean, so there is a bit of a wealth effect.
That's inequitable, right? Like it'll be
Completely, but yeah, I mean, but you're talking about people who buy Cartier. So by definition, you're talking about a very the highest end of the market. So, I think you probably, with some of those businesses, the real estate market has been asset prices have been on a tear in India.
Yeah.
And that that is inherently cyclical. So there will be a correction.
Yeah.
And I think you will see a little bit fallout of that at the very high end from a consumption perspective. But look, I mean, I have not heard anything, and I don't have any insight into kind of the potential for a recession, maybe a modest slowdown in growth, but I think some of that may be related to what happens globally. Tariffs could make an impact. I mean, let's see, it's a period of global geopolitical uncertainty.
Wow. What would you do if you were 23, 24, graduating from college, trying to get your first job or in your first job? How would you think about the world? Because home ownership has become difficult. Asset creation has become difficult. Wages in general have been muted, or wage growth has been muted. For the average person watching this, how do they think about even the arbitrage for knowledge and information is now reducing significantly.
You know,
because of AI.
I have a very simple answer, which is don't overthink this.
Yeah.
You know, the way you phrase it, like, you know, it's like if I'm a 21, 22-year-old and you ask me a question and you phrase it in that way, it would make my head spin. Boss, what do I know? I mean, all you can do is go find a job, any job, find a mentor, find a job that teaches you something. So much of life is serendipity. Right? I mean, literally I'm not a believer in messages from my life or my book or whatever, but to the extent that there is a message, it's just one thing I will say is my whole life has been a series of mostly fortunate accidents. Yeah, I'm sitting there. I mean, I talk about it in my book. I mean, I'm sitting here at St. Stephen's College, Delhi University. I meet some guy who tells me, you know, America chale jao.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, and he helps me, and I land up there, right? How do I land up at Morgan Stanley? Well, I happen to be an Indian guy, actually, Bengali, who was the only Indian managing director. Took a real liking to me. I mean, how did I end up at SoftBank? It was my friend Nikesh Arora. Right?
Yeah.
So there is so much in life that you cannot control. Don't get hung up on, I need to position myself like this or position myself like that, or I have to do a STEM degree or computer science degree or whatever. Just like keep your head down, get a job. Any job where you learn something, you know, hopefully pays the bills. And things will, keep your head down. And if there's something you're good at, if something you're really, really good at, if you have a particular talent, latch on to that. Don't latch on to your passions. That's dangerous. That's idiotic, right?
Yeah.
I think that is horrible advice.
Yeah.
Anyone who tells you follow your passion, that's the worst advice. But if you have a particular skill, something you're really, really good at, right? What I gave you is generic advice for people who are not really sure what they're really good at. Which is like, I wasn't sure what I was really good at. Right?
Yeah.
You know, maybe I was good at math or whatever. What do you do with that? Right? I mean, you know, kind of, you're good at algebra. What is that? You know, what does that do for the world? Right? So it is. What I'm talking about is just a generic prescription for anyone who doesn't have a particular talent. You know, kind of, I'm not a Sachin Tendulkar, or I'm not like a, you know, kick-ass coder or whatever. Like, you just keep your head down and, you know, don't be over-ambitious. You know, find a mentor, learn. You know, be curious, be humble, and things will happen.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about being an entrepreneur yourself?
No,
Outside of investing?
no, not strong enough. Takes a lot of courage to be an entrepreneur. I've always taken the safe way. I'm not a risk taker. by
But
nature.
but you've been so close to so many of them.
I have, but you go back to my book. I mean, it is that conversation, you know, kind of the cooks and hunters.
Yes.
You know, when he tells
The
me you're a
one
cook.
with one where you went and did an intervention with him.
Well, sort of.
You call it an intervention,
Sort
right?
of, yeah, exactly. And you know, when you know the hunters and cooks, like, you know, I value hunters more than cooks. You're a cook. I don't take that personally. I realize that. I mean, I'll always be a cook. Sounds like a little bit pejorative. Right? You know,
You wanted it to be a chef at least.
yeah, well, you know, but it is yeah. That's like I'm self-aware enough to realize that I'm not a risk taker.
But at some point you will be, right? At some point you're like, okay, now what risk is there? Because your exposure is nothing. Like reputationally you're secure, financially you're secure, and then
Well, look, I mean,
I always wonder, like
writing a book, putting yourself out there, for me, that's risk taking. You're exposing yourself when you're writing about yourself in a very personal way.
Yeah.
You know, kind of being vulnerable. You know, kind of that's taking a risk. What I'm doing now, writing fiction. You know, I could write a book and people throw up all over it. That's taking a risk.
Yeah, I agree
Different
with you.
kind of risk. Different kind of risk.
I agree with you. Content is a big risk.
In some sense, you know, you have to want to be a writer because it can be, you know, it is. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've gotten mostly great reviews, but every now and then, someone will leave a really, really nasty review,
Really?
and I look at it as like, oh, come on. You know, it's hurtful. So
Yeah.
you do take a risk, but completely different kind of risk.
Yeah. No, but content is will make you vulnerable, and especially content that blows up. So I think the money trap has possibly been read by people who, if you meet for 15 minutes over a cup of coffee, you will have an intelligent conversation with them.
Yeah.
But the moment you write something which goes to, like, you know, 500,000 people,
Yeah.
that's when the bottom 20% who derive joy by just shitting on other people,
Yeah.
that's when you should stop reading comments. I know, have you read When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi?
No.
I'm actually reading, I was talking to Ankur about it. And in that he says something very interesting, that For some people, they look for a job. For me, I looked for a calling from the very beginning. And then he was talking more about medicine. But this seems to be something that you kind of clearly characterize as your calling. But yeah, talk about
Yeah, I don't know about calling. It's just something I want to do and something I enjoy doing. And a lot of people describe me as being, kind of opinionated and have strong views on everything. And I find writing my mind's always working overtime. And I find writing in some ways therapeutic. And I write because it just helps me understand the world, everything around me. And so, yeah, it's kind of an inner desire. So I write about all kinds of stuff. I read a lot, by the way, but I seldom read nonfiction, which I find it's another observation about India. And I've been out of touch with India, I must say, in many ways, though I'm always back. But when I wrote the book and I've started following what sells in India, what's going on in the publishing market, I'm blown away by how nonfiction completely dominates.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess it comes from this kind of desire to learn self-improvement.
Yeah.
It's just blows. I look at the Amazon charts for nonfiction, and invariably you look at the top 25, the top 15 will be like books that help you get into IIT or prepare for gym, whatever. Literally, it's all of that, right? And then beyond that, it's self-help books, like Psychology or Money or whatever. Not to put anyone down, but it's like literally, it's nonfiction, it's instruction manual, it's how-to. And I find those books singularly unsatisfying because I think the content for 90% of those books, forget about the test prep, etc. That's completely separate. I think the content can be summarized in like if not a 30-minute podcast, it's probably a kind of a one-page blog post. People don't have that much to say, and I wish they wouldn't write books. I think to me, if you want to write a book, be interesting, be entertaining, and tell a story.
Yeah.
And you can learn a lot from stories. And I think stories are a really interesting way to understand sort of the human condition, which is a little bit of what I'm trying to do now. Let's see if I succeed or not, but I'm having fun doing it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's your process?
I wish I'd tell you I had one. It's a little bit, with the book, I have an outline of a plot in terms of where it begins and broadly where it goes and how it ends. But there is a very strong element, and I think all good writers will tell you this, of making it up as you go along. Because when you write, the story the characters take on lives of their own.
Yeah.
And it becomes a journey. And as you write about them, you begin to understand the characters a little bit better. And when you see it written down, you kind of say, okay, your preconceived notion of how this person would have behaved, when you see it written down, doesn't really work. So it keeps on evolving. In terms of in terms of how I work, the ideal for me, which doesn't always work because I travel, I move around, and is to set aside a few hours in the morning. Ideally like minimum of 3 hours. More than that gets tedious to just plain write. And then concurrently, a lot of people say that you should be reading while you're writing. I think that's complete BS. I read a lot, but I'm very particular about what I read when I'm writing. Because whatever you're reading in a subconscious way will manifest itself into your writing. That writer's voice, style of writing, it'll just bounce off into it'll be reflected subconsciously in your own writing.
How long did Money Trap take end to end?
The hardcore writing period was probably about like over a year and a half. Yeah. And then there's a production process, which is way longer than it needs to be, because I think the publishing industry needs to understand that you don't need 3 rounds of editors, copy editors, which take 2 months, could be done by AI within 2 minutes.
Yeah. Do you use AI at all?
Not meaningfully. Casual engagement, I use it for search, for research.
Yeah. Research, yes. But to write?
No, you can't. How? You mean like get AI to write for me?
Yeah.
No, that is like that kind of destroys the purpose.
A lot of people are now doing that with content.
You can, but again, gets to what kind of content. You can never be, but almost by definition, you can never be really original with AI. What is AI doing? It's just copying what other people have done.
You'll be surprised. So, for example, I know this is not an apple to apple, but for example, I have now started training ChatGPT on writing really good LinkedIn posts. So I write on LinkedIn maybe once every couple of weeks or every week.
Yeah.
And I told it, in one of the projects that you put on the hat of Shantanu and go through all my LinkedIn posts and characterize it in personality and mood. So what kind of personality, what do you think I was going through, what kind of mood was I in? So they kind of found it out, right?
Yeah.
Here you're angry, here you're whatever. I said, great, you've understood this. Now I want to write something about, let's say, Zomato's latest results. And I wanted to put on my hat of Shantanu. I'm in a good mood and I'm analytical. I want to put in numbers.
No, that I get. You
But
see,
they
but
put the
I
whole
get
thing
it.
out.
But what you're trying to do, again, this goes back to my point, which is you're giving it a clear directive, which is write in Shantanu's voice.
Correct.
Right. So I can get AI to write in the story of such and such writer, but that's not the same as being completely original.
But you could say write in Alok Sama's voice.
That's also not original. That's Alok Sama's voice. It's copying someone. You're telling it to copy someone.
But it's you, right?
I know, but you're telling it to copy someone. So then it'll look at my writing and it'll not quite plagiarize, but take my voice, my way of. It's a little pompous to suggest that I have a voice, but I mean,
No,
it's
of
like,
course,
Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's like.
I just feel like volume of content that one can create will go up dramatically if we're able to train these models to create. And that's something that we're kind of grappling with for the podcast.
I think to me what it does, it raises the bar for you and I to be original in what we do. Original in what you do by way of, in other words, come up with something that is original, that AI couldn't come up with. And by the way, it goes back to, kind of advice to people in their 20s or whatever. Just be curious.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we used to, Bruce Lee was huge at the time, right? And he used to have, used to be these T-shirts that said, be water, my friend.
Yeah.
I think if I had to have a modern version of that T-shirt, I'd say, be curious, my friend.
Yeah.
But be water, what he meant was be flexible, mold yourself, which is very important.
Yeah.
But I think that premium of being curious has increased exponentially in today's environments, because you have to be curious to be a step ahead of AI, because otherwise you're always copying. You're never to be a jump ahead, a step ahead of the machines. I sort of say this in my book. You've got to be, the intellectual curiosity is really, really important. So if Spotify tells you you've listened to these 3 things, listen to this next, or you've read Alok Sama or whatever, read this next, ignore it, because that's just dumbing you down.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I give the example, Paul Simon, right? Graceland, one of the greatest works of art in popular music, right? How did he get that idea? He heard someone give him a cassette tape that had the street music of Soweto in South Africa.
Yeah.
He said, this is really interesting. I could do something different with that, right? Yeah. And he came up with this brilliant album that had South African musicians, right? This was apartheid era, it was very controversial. Yeah. But he went and he got these musicians, street musicians, and he laid on his own lyrics, very American, and he came up with an absolutely brilliant album. Now, if he'd been listening to Spotify, they would have fed him, more Elton John, Bob Dylan or whatever, and then you're doing more of the same, right?
Yeah.
That's why that curiosity is ignore what machines are telling you, do something original. Read something, listen to something different.
Yeah, discovery outside the recommendation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Where do you spend time now, Alok? Between
physically?
Yeah, physically.
New York, both my kids are there, and both working now. London, which is probably, it's certainly where I spend a chunk of my time. And then I think I like spending probably a month a year over here. This time of year is the best, in Delhi. And for me, India means Delhi. And then, and we passed through Dubai a little bit too, which has become a really interesting, nice place to be in over the winter months.
Dubai, I was there 10 days back.
When you
so
sent
nice,
me those
right?
clips of your father.
Yeah. But Dubai is really cool.
Yeah.
Like in 10 years, it's totally
transformation is quite remarkable. Yeah.
And professionally, like outside of writing, what takes your time? Do you get involved with Indian?
I have an engagement with I chair the advisory board for a small venture fund. Couple of really
Which one
smart
is
guys.
that?
It's called Valhalla Ventures.
Okay.
All of their deals are in the US.
Okay.
Actually, there's one deal they did in Africa. Nothing in India. But I'd love to steer them in that direction. And And then I have a senior advisor role at Warburg Pincus. But those guys are just so damn good at what they do that I don't really add any value to their thinking.
This is in India or globally?
No, globally. Yeah.
Okay. And any plans of getting involved? And I know you were speaking at the DSG event.
Yeah, well, I was, because Deepak is, when I had this joint venture with Bear Capital, with the Dubai government. It's called Bear Capital Partners, and we started an India fund, and Deepak and I did that together, and we'd done a deal individually way back when, 20 years ago. We bought a chunk of Sula wines
Sula
together.
wines, yeah.
That was one of my first deals.
Oh, you were also part of that?
Eventually. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very early days. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was probably his first or second deal, I think.
First deal. Yeah.
Wow. He's also been on the pod.
Oh, really?
He's been on the pod, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. So he was a huge fan of the book, and so they asked me to come and speak. So I did that yesterday.
Did you check out like a bunch of their portfolio companies?
Well, they were all. I mean, it's all consumer products, so a lot of them were there. So
Did you have the Go Zero ice cream?
I did not have the Go Zero ice cream because I'm kind of lactose intolerant.
Oh God.
And they didn't really have a. I think they do a vegan
version. Yeah, they do.
They didn't have it there.
Oh man, Kiran's my B school classmate, and then we are investors. The fund. Yeah. So this Barbershop is a 30 crore fund we run. Yeah. Like it's a.
Oh really? Okay.
It's a side hustle off a side hustle, right. But with it runs the deal flow. And Go Zero is one of our portfolio companies.
Okay. Cool.
But any other areas in which you want to get involved with India, like either.
From my perspective, technologies are natural, and I'd love to see more, do more, and I had some interesting discussions with people about getting involved in a more meaningful way.
Interesting. That 1 month should go up a little bit. My personal push to you, and maybe we should connect offline, is I would love to see you get involved with Indian founders and Indian.
I'd love to. No, it's great. It's really, really cool.
And more fun, and also creative stuff. I think you know what? Frankly, I think the biggest alpha creator for entrepreneurs is creativity.
Yeah.
And you come in from, and creativity finds its manifestation in different ways. You're doing it through writing and storytelling. And I think that's such a powerful thing for founders to learn. So being able to marry technology and storytelling would be beautiful.
Or to read. I mean, it is like, look at what people read. This goes back to my point. I mean, don't read like what. I don't want to keep taking names of books that people read. You know what they are, kind of the bestsellers. Don't read that stuff. I mean, read fiction. Read the great writers that have kind of stood the test of time, and you'll learn a lot about life. Yeah. People were, it's 18th century. People were writing about AI, if you can believe.
Yeah.
Tales of Hoffman, E.T.A. Hoffman, 18th century writer, right? Writes beautifully the story about this humanoid, like a woman who everyone's in love with, and his central message was that she was a little bit too perfect, which is just a wonderful concept, and it's just so topical right now in terms of what we're doing with humanoids and with AI. But this guy was writing about it in the 18th century.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you discover good books to read? Like, do you follow reading lists? For example, Bill Gates is a great anchor. I love the stuff he reads. I usually enjoy it more often than not.
Yeah. He's probably biased towards nonfiction too, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, no, I mean, I look at the usual lists. I mean, I tend to look at, what's on the radar for the New Yorker or the Atlantic or whatever. But I have a fundamental view, because I'm a math geek. I think this way. Think about what I'm saying. Is if a book has withstood the test of time, the chances that it's worth reading are probably higher than something that's been on the bestseller list
for you
in the last few weeks, right?
Yeah.
So I tend to gravitate a lot towards older books, and I will frequently go back and reread old books, and they're just so remarkably, even applied in a modern context, they can be really, really wonderfully illuminating.
I hope life is full of books and stories, and I hope that you continue to dish out stuff that my dad enjoys for sure, and me too.
See, that gives me so much pleasure when you send me that video. I mean, just to the idea that something you wrote gives someone enjoyment like that.
Yeah.
Forget about learning or insight or whatever, that's second order. But at the basic level, you're just connecting with people, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I really think that he lived his vicarious, he's a man of he's a shauqeen admi.
Yeah.
Like he loves, the wines you mention and
Yeah.
the fact that you had a private jet and that you got dressed in your, your night suit for a
Yeah.
4-hour flight.
Yeah.
I think he lived that life through that book.
But that comment he made in that little video clip he sent me, and I told the story, by the way, without naming him or you. I told the story at the LP conference yesterday.
DSG.
About the camellia effect.
Correct.
That's so spot on
Yeah.
because that actually is a great example.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You and I discussed this. It is so I love it when people kind of get that and they relate to that. Okay, he had his own way of describing it,
Yeah.
but like, okay, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
He's right.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've beautifully, I think the way you talk about the stuff you buy or the stuff that you value, you're very honest about it.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
honest about the fact that why you value it,
Yeah.
whether it's, a good glass of wine or whether it's, the 5 suits.
Or I'm
whatever.
honest. I'm honest enough to say that I was caught up in the culture of money and greed. And my wife kind of helped me to be grounded. But I don't want to make any bones about it. I mean, I was in that, call it that money trap, but I was part of that culture. It's just very, very difficult to stay away
It is
or
the
to
most.
not get caught up in it.
It is the most solid proxy for excellence and success, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Money is and how do you show it? It's human desire to do it. So, but are you out of it now? Do you feel like there are more
Yeah.
valuable things in life?
Yes. But that's a very, don't read too much into that because that's coming from me. It's very easy to be cynical, rightly so. It's like, oh, come on, you've got enough. It's easy for you to say.
Correct. I think that's what people say, right?
Yeah.
The ones who say that money is not that important are the ones who have a lot
Usually,
of it.
exactly. So I do not want to. I would never discourage anyone from going out and actually in India people are a lot more comfortable with it. Less so in the U.S. now, which is so ironic. It's like you got to go out and make money.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In the US, less so?
Less so because it's become very unfashionable. It's very unwoke to talk about being rich among the young millennials in particular.
Are you
Leftward
serious?
swing, I think it's changing, but that there's a very strong leftward drift among millennials in the U.S.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It makes no sense at all.
Well, it's not ridiculous, but it is. I mean, it is. It is what it is. I don't want to turn this into a political or an American political discussion.
Yeah, I
Very
think,
polarizing.
why does that happen, by the way? Why do random social topics become political in the US? Like, why is abortion
Well,
a
the U.S.
political
has
issue?
become. Well, that's been kind of it has its roots in religion, I guess, but that's been the case for the longest time. But that's by no means the most polarizing issue right now. I think there's some really fundamental questions about how the U.S. approaches immigration, which
Yeah.
affects Indians. I've written about this actually. I see a strong desire for upward mobility. You talked about opportunities in India being restricted. I think the pathway to go to the U.S. and kind of get a green card, etc. I think it's going to be a lot tougher now.
Yeah,
it
for
already
sure.
is much
Oh,
tougher.
for sure, 100%. I do feel like there's going to be an inward preference for countries at least over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and usually it takes like one cycle to at least recalibrate that. But it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Well, the tariffs and all is I think just step one, but a lot of for example, in our case, the government has made no bone about the fact that they want us to make our stuff here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We go to Ministry of Commerce meetings, and the powers that be are very clear. I don't want you to make 2% extra margin and take stuff outside the country. You make it here. You're the entrepreneur. Fucking make it here. 2% के लिए बाहर क्यों जाना? Okay. Yeah, fair point. And I think everyone's kind of doing that. So that's a big part for us.
Okay,
But
cool.
Alok, I hope that this is the first of many conversations.
Yeah,
I would
enjoy it.
love to stay in touch.
Yeah.
I hope that you enjoyed today. I
Yeah.
hope the trek to Gurgaon was worthwhile.
Yeah, that's okay.
And all the best to you for your writing,
Thank
to
you.
your family, and I really hope you keep giving us more stories for us to enjoy. And thank you so much for being as honest and fun as you are.
Thank you.